Welcome to the June 16, 2017 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on the Denver City Council committee unanimously voting to rent out what now serves as the Denver Post newsroom. If the proposal is approved, city officials would move in by December 1st, paying $11.2 million over 7 years, according to Denverite.com. This, of course, is on the heels of the Denver Post announcing that its newsroom staff will move to their Denver Post printing facility. Patty Calhoun from Westward, is it painfully ironic that Denverite.com puts out a story on the news website about the printing, the one daily paper in Denver shrinking to the point where they can put everything into one building?
Oh, there's so many ironies here. It's hard to wrap them all up. Let's look at the fact that Denver's employment, the city of Denver's employment is growing so much that they need all these all this extra space. That's the first thing, and that's the one we really should be drilling down on. Where are these jobs now? Where have these people been hired? I think it's 225. And at the same time, the newsroom of the Denver Post is shrinking so much, it's maybe a third the size it was 10 years ago, that they can now find space for them up at their printing plant. What'll be nice is they'll be able to design a newsroom that makes a little more sense than the newsroom that was designed 15 years ago when they thought it was going to be so huge. But it's two worrisome signs of the time.
David Copel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. I'm not casting aspersions on any of the employees that are moving to the Denver Post building, but if the city government is growing by that much of a degree, it would seem like there's even more of a need for a daily or more newspapers to be covering what's going on and possible shenanigans, and it's shrinking at the same time. It seems like the worst of both worlds.
Well, certainly the hope of our Colorado founders in their 1876 Constitution would be a thriving press and a smaller government. We seem to be going the opposite way. It's interesting, of course there's an important advantage for journalists to be close to the center of action. And when the paper is now, I believe, at a break-even level or better, but the hedge fund deciding to try to squeeze the last drop of blood out of the turnip before they kill the paper, they're moving it while keeping their nice offices on the 11th floor in that building. They kind of remind me, in a way, of the early founders of the Post, who for a period took the stalls off the bathroom doors so that employees wouldn't linger so long and they'd get back to work quickly. And we've got that same spirit with the current owners.
So I guess to our friends at the Denver Post, we can say it could be worse.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric Sonderman, political analyst. We have government growing by such a great degree that they're taking up space that we don't already have in what is a relatively new web building. And that's not brand new, but it's new enough where there should have been space. We need more for 200 more people. And our daily newspaper shrinking to the point that it is. Is there any silver lining here? What should we be seeing? What should we be talking about?
I don't know that I have a ton to add to what David and Patty have hit. Like Patty, I see two stories here. One is the Post moving to Adams County, the Post newsroom, not the executives of Digital First, but the newsroom. I think there'll be a lot of reporters maybe writing some few more stories about traffic tie-ups on I-25 as they try to get to cover stories down that stretch of road. If there is any silver lining, I might suggest that maybe the coverage becomes a little less Denver-centric. I know on every education story, you immediately run over to DPS. Well, a whole lot of the education challenges these days are not just DPS, but there are a whole inner ring suburbs, whether it's Aurora, Thornton, North Glen, Sheridan, whatever. Jeffco, run the list. So maybe that's a silver lining story. Number two is the one you guys hit, and I totally echo, which is what is the growth of city government that necessitates such a move? Is Denver growing? Yes. Is Denver growing at the rate of employee growth? I think that's a question that needs an answer, and whether it's my friend across the table who runs a newspaper or whether it's the Denver Post who is leasing out this space, I would hope somebody would dive pretty deeply into it.
I think most folks think if the city of Denver is going to hire 225 more people, most of them will be filling potholes. Exactly. But Justine Sandoval rounds up the panel, political activist. You're in a unique position, Justine. You, as a young political activist, you grew up with a couple newspapers, but most of your life as a political activist has been with the digital media. But you're a lifelong Denverite with a family history in Denver. So how do you look at this situation with Denver growing to this big, Denver government growing, but then a daily newspaper clearly on the wane?
It's very interesting to me, and this is a very Denver story. Suddenly, people, property owners, can't afford to live in Denver anymore, can't stay here, so they're moving out, renting their space up to be able to just continue to survive. I remember I was devastated when the Rocky Mountain News closed down. It was a very sad time in Denver, and it really was symbolic of an end of an era, and the slow decline of the Post has been huge. I'm kind of, like I've said before, on that millennial line, so I do remember times when you still answered the phone on the wall and things like that. So this is very interesting. I think that it's also interesting the city would elect to pay $11 million in rent for a building to keep them centralized there when they own a lot of property that they can move those employees into. So taking on that expense to me is pretty interesting that they suddenly have $11 million of rent for more employees in Denver, and it's growing to that point. Yet people can't afford to live in the city anymore, and we're having such a hard time coming up funding these public programs, but we have $11 million in rent. So to me, it's very sad. I'm happy that they're able to find a solution to this situation so they can continue to exist. But it is kind of like one of those moments, especially as a lifelong Denverite, to see the paper leave Denver.
Justine, I think you made a good point. Perhaps we buried the lead on this press story. It's more about $11 million being able to be spent for rent. You're right. That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Postgame this week. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.